Welcome back to Quantum Conversations. My name is Sarah, and I'm so excited to bring you another episode with my co-host, Carrie Bennett. We are really enjoying giving you this show and talking about these topics that seem really complex so that we can help them be a little bit more understandable to the everyday person. I just wanted to remind you to head down into the show notes to make sure you get my free resources and Carrie's free resources. We've both spent a lot of time compiling our favorite list of products, as well as how you can actually implement a lot of these things into your daily life for free using our guides. We also both have amazing courses that you have access to in the show notes as well. And we co-host a course together called Quantum Fertility. We've actually had some quantum fertility babies just born this summer, and we have several quantum fertility pregnancies going on right now where women were told that they were not going to get pregnant, and we have been able to show them the way using these circadian principles and quantum biology, and we're so grateful for this. So make sure you head down to the show notes, check out those resources, check out those courses. And if you are enjoying the show, if you're watching on YouTube, make sure to subscribe to our channel, hit the like button, leave us a comment. And if you're listening on the podcast app, please head on over to Apple or Spotify, leave us up to a 5-star review. Since we are such a brand new show, we want to make sure that we're getting this message out to as many people as possible. Again, we want to make these concepts of quantum biology and circadian biology understandable and applicable to the everyday person. We want you to pull up a chair, come hang out, and enjoy this conversation with me and Carrie, and have a fantastic day. Hello, welcome back to Quantum Conversations. We have a guest here with us today in my house, Dr. Sara Pugh. So welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah, we decided it'd be fun to fly Sarah here just for Quantum Conversations episode. So here we are.
Yeah, Sarah, I'm so excited to chat with you because I think today we decided that we would love to introduce the audience to your beautiful brain in regards to deuterium and ketosis, which are two really awesome topics in this quantum health world that I think deuterium is up and coming, and I think ketosis is well known, but I think there's a lot of mistakes made in the ketosis world in light of things like leptin, in light of things like not doing it with circadian signaling as well. So where do you want to start? Where would be the best entry point into this conversation?
I think probably what is deuterium, because it's not, technically it's just an isotope of hydrogen, which is naturally occurring. But because hydrogen's in group 1, which is a metal, we can say that deuterium's the heavy metal that nobody talks about. And because of its size, it can basically, in simple terms, wreak havoc in the body, but only when it's in the wrong place. And it's not just about how to get deuterium out of yourself, it's how you can manage not taking in too much, but not to say that it's poisonous. It's just when, like anything, when you have too much of it in the wrong place, it can be pretty destructive. When we'll get into that in a moment.
Sure. So yeah, absolutely. And so, I mean, I think it's important for people to realize, like, we got a ton of hydrogen in our bodies, right? Because a lot of people are like, so who cares about this deuterium thing? Well, if you think of the fact that every 90 or 99 out of every 100 molecules is water, and water is H2O, it means we got a lot of H's that can either be what we would call, I guess, normal hydrogen, which is technically called protium, or deuterium. So I loved your conversation you had with Laszlo Boros on deuterium. And what was fascinating was, like you said, deuterium is not bad nor good. It's just we need it in the right locations. And I thought one of the most fascinating places that he highlighted where I guess the body maybe sequesters deuterium is in the connective tissue. I know.
Yeah, because that was our episode last
just did
about fascia and the connective tissue. So that's very interesting.
And also the other one, I haven't released the podcast with Dr. Stephanie Seneff. The deuterium can actually support and stabilize the EZ water because it gives it gel. So it's all about being in the right place at the right time. And I think with the collagen, it makes sense that it would be a way to stabilize our collagen. But also deuterium is supposed to be in the blood and the cerebral spinal fluids because it has a function relating to light there. And I think in my podcast with Dr. Zapatero, we talked a lot about the cerebral spinal fluid. We didn't have a chance to talk about deuterium, but he would have known all about it. So that's what I'm saying. It's not like mercury where it's destructive everywhere. It's more about having accumulated too much and having it in the wrong place. And I think the worst place of all to have it is in your mitochondria because it really is kryptonite to them.
So, yeah. Okay. So talk to people about how deuterium, where would it be found in the mitochondria and what the problem with that is?
Well, in the mitochondria, you've got the ATPase that it's a motor that spins, and hydrogens, the small ones, are meant to go down, whereas a deuterium is too big. So it basically blocks it up and breaks it, just like sort of shoving a spanner in the works or a spoon in a blender like I did yesterday. And that's what happens. I was making keto desserts because I know we're going to talk about keto in a moment. But yeah, that's basically what deuterium does to mitochondria's motor. And once you've broken its ATPase, that's the end of the mitochondria. And we all know that without them, we're basically stuffed. And the mitochondria in our bodies have got a unique filtering system called the TCA cycle to check about 6 or 7 or more times to make sure a deuterium doesn't sneak in. It's sort of a bit like a nightclub and a bouncer. Because every now and again in a nightclub, somebody bad gets in, but most of the time the bouncers keep them out. So that's what the TCA cycle does to keep the deuterium out of the mitochondria as best it can. And then the mitochondria will then make deuterium-free or deuterium-depleted water so we can sort of naturally start to flush deuterium out of our bodies. And that, I think, will tie into why ketosis is really important. And how you don't just have to drink deuterium depleted water, because some people think, well, I can't afford it. And I think, great, fair enough. I hear you, but don't worry, you can do it other ways. Because Dr. Borosh didn't mention deuterium depleted water once in the podcast.
Yeah, when I talked to him on my podcast, he was kind of against, when I brought it up, he kind of poo-pooed it and was like, no, that's not what I want people doing to deplete deuterium. You know, I think his whole point was like, you have to do all these other things that I'm sure Dr. Sara will talk about to deplete deuterium. Otherwise, the water is very expensive and it's going to be a waste. And I've seen that in real time with clients that they just buy the water and they ignore all the other things that you're supposed to be doing. And they're like, I just spent all this money on water and I don't feel any different at all. And I'm like, well, you got to do the whole thing, right?
Yeah, it's a complete package. I think before we get into like the deuterium depletion strategies, where would we encounter deuterium on a day-to-day basis? How does it get into our bodies?
Processed food is like really high up, high carbs and sugar. Because if we look at food, fat's very low, protein is kind of low to medium, and anything high sugar and especially processed food, that's where it's high. And then water, the closer you are to the equator, the higher the deuterium in the water. But we'll come to why that's the case. And then I think supplements is what Stephanie, when I did my podcast with Dr. Stephanie Seneff, we really went for supplements, because I think that's where it sneaks in, because a lot of people we know eat really healthily, but then
they'll take 50 supplements a day.
And obviously collagen supplements, because you take
those are some of the worst,
because you take like 10 grams of that, whereas even in something like Prozac that's got 18 hydrogens and it could have a deuterium, the pill is like tiny.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you think that the collagen supplement in and of itself, in the actual amino acids, you'll find the deuterium, or do you think it also has to do with the connective tissue having that hydration shell of water associated with it, that where in our bodies it's going to have a lot more deuterium there?
I don't think anybody's tested it, because I think what we were saying before, that if the collagen comes from an animal that's grass-fed, and Dr. Borosh said the heavier the animal, the more deuterium there's going to be in. That's why, lamb potentially is better than beef, because it's lighter. And if it is grass-fed collagen from a sort of animal or non-grass-fed, you're just basically eating where all the deuterium's been sequestered, because it's supposed to go in the collagen.
So bone broth, like what are your thoughts on people who want to make bone broth?
With oxtail, because with a tail, all the tail ever does is that. So it's got hardly any collagen in it because it's so low tensile strength that you can eat a bone broth. And also if you're making just bones, it's only the bone. You're not having any of the meat around it. And even if you want the oxtail, which is collagenous, it doesn't do much a tail. It swishes some flies away a couple of times a day.
That's interesting. I love that. Okay. So the one thing that, with your conversation with Stephanie Seneff, that what I found fascinating was the fact that companies don't control for deuterium. And so the implication that I took away from that was, let's say you're giving someone is the one that I found fascinating is when she said, well, how do we know that melatonin is deuterium depleted when we take it in supplement form, whereas the body has a means of making sure deuterium is not in the melatonin molecule itself, because perhaps it behaves differently when it's full of deuterium versus when it's not.
But also it's the same as anything, because like a ketone or melatonin has roles in the mitochondria. So you're taking, and same as NMN and NI, you're taking something that's going to go really near to the mitochondria, like things like vitamins. They don't go in the mitochondria per se. And then there's also, it's not released yet, my Stephanie Seneff Unleashed Part 2, which she goes into this even in more depth, because it's all about deuteriated methyl groups, which is a whole other really exciting angle of deuterium in the body. And a lot of people are really interested in methylation because of MTHFR. Of what people have heard of, and that podcast is like it's so good. I just need to upload it. So it's Stephanie Seneff, really in a flow state.
Love it. I can't wait for that one. That'll be fun. So let's summarize for a second here, because, that's what we do on this, this podcast. So basically the body has deuterium. It's a natural thing. And when it's a form of hydrogen, and when it's in certain places in the body, that's great, right? It probably gives the connective tissue its tensile strength or its length tension relationship, protects that tensegrity network. When it's in other exclusion zones in the body, it also stabilizes the exclusion zone, because that deuterium wants to bind to oxygen more strongly than a light hydrogen. So in essence, you could also view the formation of exclusion zone water as a means of sequestering deuterium and also getting light hydrogen where it needs to go, funneling it in proton wires throughout the body. And then when that goes awry, which I think our modern exposure to processed foods, carbohydrates out of season, lots of supplements, I think that can make deuterium go awry, as can, I would imagine, that dysfunctional mitochondria or mitochondrial dysfunction. I would imagine that there has to be some TCA cycle dysregulation as well that's happening there, where the deuterium has a chance to kind of sneak through the bouncers, as you imagine. And so once deuterium gets into the mitochondria, if it reaches a certain threshold that it can jam up those ATPases, the mitochondria becomes dysfunctional. And as we've talked about many times in this podcast, the body has to make that deuterium depleted water. It really is everything. ATP matters too, but that deuterium depleted water is essential. And if that goes awry, then whatever that tissue that's happening in, that tissue can start to express symptoms that can eventually get a disease diagnosis.
Yep. Yeah, definitely. And back to the TCA cycle, when that starts to break or get blocked up, that's one of the first stages of cancer. And as much as I'm not very big on supplements anymore, methylene blue can actually help deuterium deplete the TCA cycle, but you have to use it in a specific way, not just willy-nilly. But like we're going to talk about, you can do lots of free things without supplements yourself to get the deuterium out.
Cool. So let's talk about that then. So this is who wants to deuterium deplete? Are we looking at just longevity? What about, hey, on a yearly basis, maybe I should go through a period of deuterium depletion, especially if I live in a seasonal environment where I would naturally be exposed to less carbohydrates. What about, people who have, say cancer or other serious mitochondrial dysfunctions? Where do you feel the need for deuterium depletion lies? Should we get it tested? I've had many clients get it tested, and they also test their water. And it's interesting, their water and their salivary deuterium levels are almost exactly the same.
I have the same thing. I have a client that's like way up north, kind of in like Colorado, and her well water was actually like 130 ppm.
Yeah, because it's at elevation. Deuterium is lower at elevation. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And she was like, oh, I have 130 ppm in my well. I'm like, drink it, girl. And yeah, her deuterium wasn't as low as the well water, but it was in the 140s, which is actually, for someone who's not purposely doing deuterium depletion, most people I see come back at 150, 155.
Yeah,
even
exactly.
Keto for years. And it's something you have to be purposeful with doing.
Yeah. Sarah, any experience with that?
Yeah. The two people I've asked to get a test, it came back at 149, and they were both in the UK. And obviously, being higher latitude, the water there is going to be probably 147-ish, but both of them are exposed to a lot of tech and blue light, because to do with quantum, just in simple language, red light gets deuterium out or puts it in the exclusion, and blue light, being a growth factor, makes you hold it in. And then the non-native EMFs change the way that bonds in hydrogen and water are affected, and it makes the deuteriums nastier and more likely to stay in you. So we have to always take into account things like that. So that's what I've observed with them, because that technically theirs should have been lower, but then I know about people's what they get up to, because I ask lots of questions, and I would say for them the blue light and is keeping it in them.
Well, that blue light in and of itself can really wreak havoc to the mitochondria. So you can imagine that could also dysregulate. The deuterium can get dysregulated, or they're just not making deuterium depleted water either, right? If their mitochondria can't do that for them. That's interesting. Yep. Okay, so step one in a deuterium, I'd love to hear. And Sarah, maybe we can just share what would our recommendations be if someone really says, 155. I don't want my deuterium to be there. My family has a history of X, Y, and Z. I'm doing the quantum stuff. So maybe we can assume that people are seeing the sunrise, blocking the artificial light. What?
Gotta be doing that. The light is foundational. If you're not doing the light piece, don't bother.
So what are the key aspects of the light piece besides blocking the artificial light, that blue light? Well,
I think if you've got a poor circadian rhythm, you can't detox anything properly.
Right.
And it's like a process, so that would be the main thing, and people are familiar with that, so that's what I would say. And then I'm a massive fan of UV light. I won't go into it this time, but also UV light makes you sweat, and that's partly how you get deuterium out. And I appreciate that in the UK at the moment there isn't any, and we'll go into that another time of what I do in the winter, not this podcast. But I think what you were saying, what can I do that's easy, is go keto.
Yeah. Okay. So ketosis would be a very good way. So you were saying before that fat does not have as high of the hydrogen found in fat is not likely to be deuterium, and potentially because the deuterium just doesn't fit into those bond angles in the same way.
Yeah. And basically with all fats like butter, macadamia nuts, all of these, they're like 120, 118, and olive oil, everything, they're all the same. Whereas when you get into meats, it can depend whether it's grass-fed or not. So it's very, very simple. And also Dr. Borosh and Stephanie Sen have published a paper about mountaineering and being deuterium depleted. And the diet that the athlete ate included lots of avocados. So they're okay as well. They're low. So I would say, you'd build your keto backwards, choose your fats, and then you can have proteins, but then make a decision, have one of those sort of more fat-based keto diets. Carnivore, you could easily accidentally overeat protein, but it's going to be better than what you were doing before, and you can deal with the level of protein, not to be afraid of protein either, but just to be aware that the fats don't have to, they're that low, they're like 120, so there isn't any that I asked in detail whether it was cacao butter, coconut oil, all of them, and they're all in like that sort of 120, 118 range.
So, I have a range. I love to see people closer to 130, right? What would you consider to be a healthy range to shoot for in terms of deuterium if they get it tested?
probably under 140, because I think Dr. Boris said if you're in the 130s, your risks of diabetes, cancer, obesity, autoimmunity, and all the things that are very prevalent nowadays pretty much go away. And you're following one marker and one thing, not these gigantic labs that we were talking about, a giant lab earlier, when there's so many numbers and you don't know what. It gives you a very clear focus. I've got this thing I want to lower, and I've got a pathway to lower this one marker, which I can retest later. So that's why I would say there.
No, I love that. It does simplify things. And what I love about deuterium, one of my members, she may recognize herself when she hears this description, but she's like, she dives down these rabbit holes, and she basically comes back, and it's like a rabbit hole on vitiligo, a rabbit hole on histamine, or a rabbit hole. And she's like, all roads really do lead to light and water and deuterium and melanin. And I'm like, they really do. What was that?
I know who you're talking about. I know her too.
Yeah, she's great. She's like the best. She's like the best. You give her a question and she goes deep into it. So yeah, I mean, I think deuterium is a fun marker because it really is. You could be diving down like the vitiligo rabbit hole, or you could dive down the cancer rabbit hole, and all roads do at some point intersect with deuterium. And so it's a very simplified marker to test and assess and track, and just know that, I guess it's reassuring for people to see it shift and change, knowing that what they're doing with their quantum lifestyle is helping their body, specifically their mitochondria, function on all cylinders.
Also, another thing about deuterium is it's more magnetic than hydrogen. And I think the magnetism side of this really fascinates me, because I've gone into a deep dive into magnetism to do with spirituality and crystals. But again, deuterium being more magnetic, I think, is another pathway. And also because a lot of sacred geometry and stuff is working on sort of magnetism and the Earth's field, I think there'll be some biogeometry ways to set things up, which would be very interesting to see how that affected deuterium or not, because that's, again, my current rabbit hole.
Deplete deuterium, or allow the body to sequester deuterium using biogeometry.
Yes, or
interesting
to let it just go through. I'm feeling if I'm very magnetic, the deuterium is not interested in it, just goes through. Whereas if I'm not magnetic enough, the deuterium's more likely to stay or try and stay. It's just from just thinking about it in a different way. I think magnetism is a thing we talk about least in quantum biology, and I've really started to think, okay, let's learn more about this. And I think it was partly the big dive into energy and different spiritual things. And how did I know it was Sarah's blanket I was sleeping under, not Alexis's or Matt's? Because that's how information can be passed through objects and crystals, is magnetic trace. And again, because I know that deuterium is more magnetic. I mean, I don't know the answer there, so I'm just putting it out here. But I definitely think there'll be something to do with biogeometry and how we can work with deuterium. Because just to digress for 2 seconds, we're experimenting with the tower and the EMFs, and we do actually think it does block them.
Yeah.
So again,
because this is a very high non-native EMF house. Like I've had it tested, and she's here, and there's a lot going on here. And with the
because of your location, basically, is what it is.
Yeah, I'm close to. Yeah, I've done everything indoors, as much as I can, hardwire the TV and
Ethernet ports in various parts.
Yeah, we got the ports and everything. It's difficult because we have neighbors, we have a busy street, we've got power lines, we have a tower, and it's just, you can't really escape it here. And the funny thing she was mentioning is that she notices when she's in an area of like high non-native EMF, she gets plaque on her teeth. And I was having an issue with plaque on my teeth until we got the tower. And I had a little dental kit, and I would I know you're not supposed to do that. Kelly Bento will whip my butt.
No, she won't actually. I'm going to guarantee you that. We just had a great, in the membership group, we just had a great chat about dentistry. So yeah, no, she's not going to get mad at you for that.
Okay. So I would I would get little plaque on the bottom of my teeth when we moved in here, and I would just scrape it off, scrape away from the gum. And since we've had the tower, I don't have the plaque anymore. And so that's an indication to me that it is working. And then I've had a quantum physicist come to my home, and he verified that it worked.
Well, he's not just a physicist. He's like intuitive, very like he's got this very intuitive as well. Yeah,
he walked right over to it and was like, what is this? I need to learn about this. This is doing like, yeah. So yeah.
He's a polymath as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, definitely his knowledge of, because he knows how the quantum block, that cube from Q works.
Yeah, he does. And this is better than the cube. I have 2 cubes.
Interesting.
You know? Yeah.
So, but I think we should tell people, because we're going to get a lot of questions. We're talking about a product called the Cosmic Tower.
Right. And they actually have reached out to us to come on Quantum Conversations.
Thank you. This will be a perfect segue to do that. And I saw that email. I just, for some reason, got buried at the bottom of my inbox. So yeah, I mean, we would love to have them out on. And what I am going to say, although I'm cool with this, it's out there, right? Like if you present this information and you say, wait, this is healing well water from around the world that's in a certain, and it's somehow creating a toroidal field that blocks electromagnetic fields and dark energy. And it's like, yes, that's what this is. Right. And so if you're willing to hear about that, I have no problem bringing these folks on. They're lovely human beings. And I think the more we can learn about this, because I think the thing with EMFs, and Sarah, I'd love to hear your take on that. Forever, I was of the camp that shield, hide, shield, hide. And it's like, we can't do that anymore, right? We just physically can't shield and hide from EMFs. So there has to be another layer to this at some point, because the industry, the tech industry is not stopping their production of smart stuff. So I think I'm happy about things like the Cosmic Tower, because I want to give people hope that there are going to be solutions that go beyond just having to live underground for the rest of your life.
Yeah. The thing is, the phone is the worst one of all. Sure. And we can control that. That's what Sarah Hodgson said, is that it's worse. It's the worst one. And luckily, it's a bit like food. We can choose what we put in our mouths, and we can choose how much we use our phones. So there is that level of, I can control this. And then I think with shielding, there's like a lot of things like Mylar. I love that, and it's like $2 a sheet, and you can wrap things up in it, and all of your devices still work. You can wrap your Wi-Fi box up in it, and you don't have to have a divorce with your husband because he wants to watch sport.
Whoa! I've never heard that. How does the Mylar work? While it still emits a signal, but it does it harmonize? How does it?
The thing is, I think what happens with a lot of things is it's like overkill, that it blasts out loads and loads and loads of Wi-Fi, and half of it you don't even need. So you can wrap it up like to the point where hardly any comes out. So you can control it so it's not overkill. But also, the worst other things are gangways of plugs. My Trifield screams at those. All I do is I wrap them up, because you can wrap it up like a massive parcel, because it's running electricity through cables. It doesn't need to come out. And then when it comes to walls, I just turn my electric off at night, and I don't. I can do that in my house, because I'm not interested in tech. I don't have anything, and everything's unplugged unless I'm using it. So you can manage a household and not annoy your partner or children, and secretly kind of mitigate EMFs as well. And the Mylar, I found, is to be way better than buying I've got EMF blankie over there, and I've got like a bond charge hoodie, which I really liked, but they're like $200, whereas Mylar is $2. And you can, if you've got a heart issue, you could make a big shield and put the Mylar down your t-shirt and play on your phone if you have to, because it's like shielding.
I think, did you guys ever see Better Call Saul?
Yeah.
The brother that used to be the lawyer that had
that's the
electrosensitivity, and he had to like leave the firm, and everyone thought he was insane, but he was like, he couldn't deal with EMFs. Wasn't he wrapped in his living room in Mylar?
Yeah, probably. Yeah. That's what
I'm thinking of, that show.
Yeah. I've actually told one of my clients, because if you must go on your phone, just get some cardboard, wrap the Mylar around it, put it down your front, and just use your phone, because nobody's going to see like what you do in private away from everybody. Who cares? It's all, I think, about doing weird stuff that's quantum in public that deters people.
Yeah.
But and it's really cheap, the whole Mylar thing. So it doesn't matter. I'm not like trying to promote some really expensive items.
Right.
But like you said, I think, again, if people have got the money, they can buy the tower and then carry on with life as normal that way. Because again, we're catering for 2 different budgets.
Right. Yeah.
I love that. Yeah. I absolutely want to go into the tower more. And I'm going to experiment with Mylar. I might message you and ask you like if there's any well, let's put this out there. What specifications? Can you just go on Amazon and get Mylar sheets of Mylar?
It's basically emergency blanket. So they come all wrapped up, but I think this one's either silver or aluminium, but apparently the gold is like even better. So if you could get gold, and Dr. Cruz actually wrote a blog really recently about gold blocking EMF. So gold and Mylar is better, but the aluminium and silver are really good as well. And it's because it's so cheap. It's accessible to every single human being. And you can, use Mylar blankets, because I used it again in the tent, because you can go under it because it keeps you warm.
Thermal, yeah.
And it's like, I just think it's a very good thing. I mean, for somebody who can afford other things and would feel stupid having foil is like this.
I'm just over my window and
I'm using it to block out light, because I broke Sarah's blinds.
No, she didn't. It was already broken. I just never used it.
So it's got multiple uses. And Sarah, my friend Sarah Hodgson, she was the one that got me into it. And she said, whenever you travel, just always take Mylar with you, because if you're in a hotel, you can wrap up or block up something if you need to, if you can't turn it off. So, and she just says she always has it in a bag or in a car, and she's, like I said, a really top EMF surveyor in the UK, and has got just absolutely full of really useful tips for all budgets.
Okay, so we promise the listeners we'll get back to deuterium in a second. I've got one more Mylar question. So, like, we do have the Mylar sleeping bags or Mylar blankets, right, for camping, right?
Yeah, that's when I would see them as marathon runners.
Yeah, there's that. You just buy them on Amazon, and they come all wrapped up in a nice pack of 10.
But it doesn't block. So my concern is, I have read those studies from Valerie Hunt where she put people in a completely shielded room, and they went literally insane. They broke down. They started crying hysterically. These were healthy college students, because they were shielded from all of the natural electromagnetic fields and the non-native ones as well. So what I'm hearing is that Mylar does enough shielding without necessarily completely blocking out things like Earth's magnetism.
Yeah, it's like the EMF paint. I think it does. The EMF paints, I think, 30 to 40. So it basically allows us to be gradually exposed to EMFs, because we'll get used to them eventually biologically, and it doesn't block it out so much that you can't communicate with the Schumann resonance anymore. So and with the Mylar, you can just choose how much you want to wrap or not wrap. So I only do offensive pieces of electronics. I don't, wrap it myself in it.
I can't wait to play around with this thing, Sarah. Okay, you guys are gonna get pictures of me with like Mylar clothing.
Yeah,
yeah, forget it. Both be wearing Mylar next episode.
Yeah, where's your dress from? Amazon Mylar.
From foil hats to a foil cloak.
That's great. Okay, so then bringing this back to deuterium, right? Because we talked about non-native EMFs disrupting deuterium regulation in the body, and we were alluding to some ketosis. I feel like one thing that I want to put out there, because you said red light therapy is really good at depleting. I like that analogy. Red helps us to deplete and sequester. Blue helps the body kind of impairs the body's ability to
insulinogenic, right?
Yeah. I think it's like in categories like blue light and deuterium and growth factors, because children and babies need deuterium. Yeah. So right. And I can't allude to the mechanism, because it could be several, but blue light makes you more likely to hold on to it.
So that's perfect. So people can start to work on their blue light exposure, maybe increase their exposure to red, near infrared, natural sunlight, which we love, which we always recommend. The only other thing I want to put into this discussion, besides, I think we'll break this in a second and talk ketosis the next episode. Yeah, but what I just would love to put out there is I have found that sauna to be beneficial also for sequestering deuterium, simply because that heat really, I feel like, builds that exclusion zone and helps people who are I think a lot of people are exclusion zone deficient. And I think that that's a way that I've found clients utilize with other deuterium depletion strategies to really help the body regulate deuterium levels.
I agree. And you sweat it out, but then on the converse, cold thermogenesis also depletes deuterium as well.
Yeah, right. And that also is very, very good for the mitochondria. So I do want to put that out there as well. So right now, laying the foundation, right? Pay attention to the processed foods you eat. if you're that person who's on 40 to 70 supplements, I mean, I've got clients who have come to me with that amount of supplements because it just, you have debilitating symptoms and you just want that supplement that's just going to make you just feel a little bit better. And then you're afraid to get off of them. You start to acquire massive amounts of supplements. That's where you might need to sit down with someone who can help you go through your supplements to see what is really necessary, right? Let's say
don't do that alone. Cause I've had people just, hey, I watched your videos and heard you talking about deuterium and supplements, and I took myself off of everything and I crashed really hard and had this, I'm like, work with somebody to pull it out gently, take them out slowly. Don't just cold turkey, because you could set yourself up for a crash. But I agree. That's something that you should take notice of, that I think it's something people aren't really aware of, is the deuterium, the supplements.
Deuterium. Yeah. And so pay attention, eat seasonally, eat locally. And I'm excited then to dive into ketosis, because I think that's I think there's a lot of therapeutic applications to ketosis, Sarah. So I would love to hear your take on that in the next chat.
Just to interject with the supplements, I think if the sun was involved in making your supplement, say a plant, it's going to be much lower deuterium than, say, production of methylated B vitamins or something. If a factory made it, there's probably deuterium in it, and it depends how much you take, whereas the plant-based ones, the sun and plants are really fussy about deuterium as well, not as fussy as mitochondria, but they'll deplete what they can for you and put it in their sugar. And then, so don't eat the plant sugar, but I know Ash.
That's why you can do like the leafy greens.
Yeah.
Those are low in deuterium, because people freak out. They go ham when you talk about. Yesterday, I did a post on Instagram about the worst foods to eat during winter, and coconut water. Oh Lord, that was like something that upset a lot of people. To not eat coconut water, or not to have coconut water during the winter. But I also said, tropical fruit smoothies, don't have those during the winter. But I said, if you want to have some plants during the winter, cooked leafy greens, right?
Yeah,
those are
avocados.
And coconut oil is fine. Just don't drink the coconut water.
But also animals won't drink coconut water either. Even crabs won't. So again, it's always look to see what nature does and copy.
Yeah, it's like 155 ppm for coconut water. It's one of the highest.
It's really high. Yeah, it is really high. So, I mean, if you're in the tropics where the coconuts grow, you also have the UV light and the infrared to sequester it, to deplete it. So like, that's why we're proponents of seasonal and local when at all possible. So, but yeah, ketosis will be interesting, because I don't know, there's such a buzz, right? We know that being in ketosis could be so beneficial, but I'd love to hear your take on it. Because like I said, I think that there's a lot of misinformation out there about how to get into it, how deeply you have to go. We'll just go into all those fun details in the next chat.
All right. Well, we will do that in the next chat then.